The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species. It floated in space, far from any star, a neutral ground where 1,000 different races came to talk, argue, and decide the fate of the galaxy. Giant columns rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Lights from 100 different worlds gave the hall a strange, colorful glow. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in humanity's small section, watching the other species talk and laugh. Humans had been part of the council for 300 years now. In all that time, they had never been taken seriously. Elena was a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 40 years as Earth's voice in this place. 40 years of being ignored. 40 years of smiling while aliens made jokes about her people. Today, the Dralith Empire was speaking. They were a proud race, tall and strong, with scales that shone like gold. Their empire covered 2,000 star systems. Their military was feared across the galaxy. And what has humanity contributed to this council? The Dralith ambassador asked, his voice booming across the hall. 42 ships. 42 tiny, weak ships that would burn like paper against any real fleet. Laughter filled the hall. The insect-like Krethven clicked their jaws in amusement. The ancient Oryxians, who looked like trees that had learned to walk, simply watched with their glowing eyes. They were the oldest race in the galaxy, and they had seen many young species come and go. Elena kept her face calm. She had heard these insults 1,000 times before. Perhaps, the Dralith continued, humanity should pay extra tribute to the council. Since they cannot defend themselves, others must do it for them. This is only fair. More laughter. More jokes. Elena wrote notes on her tablet and said nothing. What none of them knew, what no alien had ever discovered in 300 years, was that humanity was lying. They had been lying since the very first day they joined the council. The truth began long ago, when humans first left Earth and met other species. The first aliens humanity encountered were friendly. They welcomed Earth into the galactic community. They shared technology. They seemed kind, but humans were careful. They watched. They listened, and they learned a terrible truth about the galaxy. The strong ate the weak. Always. Every time they saw the Velnoxi, a peaceful race of traders, attacked and enslaved by the Dralith. They watched the council debate for months while entire planets burned. They saw ancient species disappear forever because they had something valuable and no army to protect it. The leaders of Earth met in secret. They made a decision that would shape humanity's future for centuries. They called it Directive 7. The plan was simple. Humanity would pretend to be weak. They would show the galaxy a small fleet of simple ships. They would act humble and harmless. They would let other species laugh at them and look down on them. And in secret, they would build. The 42 ships the galaxy saw were old designs, kept running just for show. They were museum pieces, nothing more. The real ships were hidden in places no one would ever look. Deep inside Jupiter's moons, in hollowed-out rocks the size of countries, human engineers built warships. Under the red surface of Mars, in tunnels that went down for hundreds of miles, factories worked day and night. In the asteroid belt, hidden among 1,000,000 floating rocks, shipyards produced weapons that would make the Dralith cry like children. But humanity's greatest secret was something else entirely. Something that changed everything. 50 years after joining the council, human scientists made a discovery. They found ways to fold space itself, to create pockets of reality that existed beside normal space. These hidden dimensions could hold anything: ships, stations, entire fleets, and no one could see them. No sensor in the galaxy could detect what was hidden there. For 250 years, humanity built its true military in these secret places. The numbers grew slowly at first, then faster. Engineers designed new weapons based on physics that other species hadn't discovered yet. Scientists created shields that worked in ways the Council's best minds couldn't imagine. By the time Elena Vasquez became ambassador, humanity's hidden fleet had grown to 73,000 warships. Each one was more powerful than anything the Dralith had ever built. Each one used technology that was centuries ahead of the rest of the galaxy. And still, humanity waited. Still, they pretended to be weak. The leaders of Earth knew that revealing their power would change everything. Other species would fear them. Some might attack before humanity was ready. It was better to stay hidden. Better to keep building. Better to wait for the right moment. Elena thought about all this as she sat in the council hall, listening to the Dralith mock her people. She thought about the shipyards under Mars. She thought about the fleets hiding in folded space. She thought about weapons that could crack planets. Like eggs, she smiled at the Dralith ambassador and said nothing. The meeting ended, and Elena walked back to her quarters. Her assistant, a young man named Thomas, was waiting for her. "The Dralith are getting worse," he said. "They're demanding we give them 5 of our ships as tribute." Elena sat down and poured herself a drink. "Let them demand. Ambassador, they're also moving warships toward Velnoxy space. There's going to be another war. The Council won't stop them. They never do. I know." Thomas looked frustrated. "How can you be so calm? Every year, the Dralith get stronger. Every year, they push harder. One day, they'll push us too." Elena looked at her young assistant. He didn't know about Directive 7. Very few people did. The secret had been kept for 3 centuries, passed down from one leader to the next. "Thomas," she said softly, "do you trust me?" "Of course." "Then trust that humanity knows what it's doing. Trust that when the time comes, we will be ready." Thomas didn't understand, but he nodded. That night, Elena received a coded message from Earth. The Dralith had given the Velnoxy an ultimatum. Surrender or die. The war would begin in 1 month. And the Dralith had also sent a message to Earth. They wanted humanity's fleet to join them in the attack. If Earth refused, the Dralith would consider it an act of war. Elena read the message twice. Then she sent a reply to the World Council on Earth. "The wolves are at the door," she wrote. "Advise on Directive 7 status." The reply came within an hour from the most powerful leaders on Earth. "Hold, watch, wait, the time is not yet right." Elena closed her tablet and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden in places no alien could find, humanity's true power waited in the darkness. She hoped the time would come soon. She was tired of pretending to be weak. The Dralith did not wait for an answer. 3 weeks after their ultimatum, 12,000 warships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. They came out of faster-than-light travel in a flash of blue light that lit up the darkness of space. It was the largest fleet the Dralith had ever sent anywhere. It was enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. Grand Admiral Corvith stood on the bridge of his flagship. The burning claw. He was old for a Dralith. His golden scales faded to a dull yellow, but his eyes were still sharp. He had conquered 37 planets in his career. Earth would be 38. "Send the message," he ordered. His communications officer opened a channel that would reach every screen, every radio, every device on Earth. "People of Earth," Corvith's voice boomed, "your leaders have insulted the Dralith Empire. They have refused our generous offer of alliance. This is not acceptable. You have 6 hours to surrender your planet. You will give us your fleet, your resources, and your loyalty. If you refuse, we will burn your cities to ash. There will be no second warning." On Earth, billions of people heard the message. They looked up at the sky, knowing that somewhere beyond the blue, an army waited to destroy them. Fear spread across the planet. Parents held their children. Old people prayed. Young people cried. The president of Earth, a calm woman named Sarah Chun, addressed the world. "Stay strong," she said. "Do not lose hope. We are not as weak as they believe." Most people didn't understand what she meant. They looked at the news, which showed humanity's fleet of 42 ships moving to face the Dralith. 42 against 12,000. It seemed like a joke. It seemed like suicide. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, an emergency meeting was called. Species from across the galaxy watched the events with interest. "Such a shame," the Eryxian ambassador said, his voice like wind through dead leaves. Humanity was a young species with some potential, but they should not have angered the Dralith. "Perhaps we should send help," a younger delegate suggested. The Eryxian laughed. "Help? Against 12,000 Dralith warships? No one is that foolish. Besides, what would be the point? Humanity has nothing worth saving. Let the Dralith have their little victory." Elena Vasquez sat in her section, watching and listening. Her tablet buzzed with a message from Earth. It was marked with the highest level of security. She read it once, then read it again. Her heart began to beat faster. The message was short. Directive 7 is lifted. Reveal. After 300 years, the waiting was over. Elena closed her tablet and allowed herself a small smile. Around her, aliens were still making jokes about humanity's coming destruction. They had no idea what was about to happen. On Earth, in a bunker deep under the mountains of Switzerland, Fleet Admiral Jackson Monroe received the same message. He was a large man with a shaved head and scars on his face from battles no one in the galaxy knew about. He had spent his whole life preparing for this moment. Monroe sat in a command center filled with screens and computers. Around him, officers watched data from the hidden fleets. They saw the Dralith Armada. They saw Earth's 42 visible ships. And they saw something else. Something the Dralith would never expect. "Sir," one of his officers said, "Directive 7 has been lifted. We have permission to reveal." Monroe nodded slowly. He had dreamed of this day. He had also feared it. Once humanity showed its true strength, nothing would ever be the same. "Open a channel to all hidden stations," he ordered. "All sectors. All dimensions." The communications officer worked quickly. In moments, Monroe was connected to places that didn't exist on any map. Hidden bases in the moons of Jupiter. Secret shipyards under Mars. Stations floating in folded space, invisible to every sensor in the galaxy. "All stations," Monroe said, his voice calm and steady. "This is Fleet Admiral Monroe. Directive 7 has been lifted by order of the World Council. I repeat, Directive 7 is lifted." He paused, letting the words sink in. Wake them up. Across the solar system, things began to change. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, a mountain that had stood for millions of years suddenly cracked open. Light poured from inside. Engines roared to life. Ships began to rise from the moon's icy surface. Not small ships. Dreadnoughts, each one 5 miles long, covered in weapons that glowed with strange energy. On Mars, the red desert began to shake. Huge doors opened in the ground, doors that had been hidden for 2 centuries. Ships rose from tunnels that went down into the planet's core, carriers that held thousands of smaller fighters. Battleships with armor so thick that normal weapons would bounce off like rain dot in the asteroid belt. Rocks that had seemed dead and empty suddenly came alive. They weren't asteroids at all. They were ships disguised and waiting. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands and in the folded dimensions, in the spaces beside reality that humanity had learned to hide, the largest fleet of all began to move. These were the secret ships. The ones built with technology so advanced that even Earth's own people didn't fully understand it. Grand Admiral Corvith, was reviewing his attack plans when his tactical officer made a strange noise. It was a sound of shock and fear, something Corvith had never heard from one of his crew. "What is it?" Corvith demanded. "Admiral, our sensors are detecting something." The officer's voice shook. "Ships, human ships. I know about their ships. 42 weak vessels. Nothing to worry about." "No, sir. Not 42. The officer turned to look at his admiral, his eyes wide with terror. "Our count has just passed 50,000. And it's still rising." Corvith pushed his officer aside and looked at the screen himself. What he saw made his blood turn cold. They were everywhere. Coming from Jupiter. Coming from Mars. Coming from empty space itself, appearing out of nowhere like ghosts. Human ships of designs he had never seen. Shapes that seemed wrong. Technology that glowed with energy his sensors couldn't identify. The count climbed past 60,000, then 70,000. "That's impossible," Corvith whispered. "They had 42 ships. 42. Our spies confirmed it. Our scans confirmed it." But the numbers on his screen kept growing. 73,000 human warships now surrounded his fleet. They were larger, faster, and stranger than anything the Dralith had ever faced. And they were still coming. In the council hall, every screen showed the same images. Aliens who had been laughing at humanity moments ago now stood frozen in silence. The Eryxian ambassador, oldest of all beings in the room, dropped his glass of wine. It shattered on the floor, but he didn't notice. Ambassador Vasquez stood up and walked toward the exit. Every eye in the room followed her. "Where are you going?" The Dralith ambassador demanded. Elena didn't stop. She didn't even turn around. "Home," she said simply. "I have a front row seat to what happens next." Behind her, the council chamber was silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, no one had anything to say. Grand Admiral Corvith stood frozen on his bridge, staring at the screens around him. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. The human fleet surrounded his armada like a net around a fish. 73,000 ships, each one larger and stranger than anything in the Dralith military. They moved with impossible speed and precision, gliding through space like predators circling their prey. "This cannot be real," Corvith said, more to himself than anyone else. 300 years. We watched them for 300 years. Our spies were everywhere. Our sensors scanned their entire system. They had nothing. Nothing. His second in command, a younger Dralith named Veth, approached him carefully. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Corvith didn't answer. He was still staring at the screens, watching the human ships move into formation. His tactical computer was trying to analyze them, but it kept returning errors. The weapon signatures didn't match anything in the database. The shield frequencies made no sense. Even the metal of their hulls seemed wrong, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. "Admiral," Veth said again. "They're hailing us." Corvith straightened his back. He was a Dralith admiral. He had conquered 37 worlds. He would not show fear to these humans, no matter how many ships they had. Put them on screen. The main display flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a man with a shaved head and calm eyes. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations, no medals. He looked like someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. "Grand Admiral Corvith," the human said. "I am Fleet Admiral Jackson Monroe of the Earth Defense Force. We haven't met before." There was never any reason to meet. Corvith forced his voice to stay steady. "Admiral Monroe, I see you have been hiding things from the galaxy." "Yes," Monroe said simply. "We have. Why? What was the point of this deception?" Monroe's expression didn't change. "Because we learned, very early, that the galaxy only respects power. We weren't ready to have that conversation 300 years ago. We needed time to build, to prepare, to make sure that when the moment came, there would be no doubt. No doubt about what? About what would happen to anyone who threatened our home. The two admirals stared at each other across the void of space. Corvith's crew watched in silence, too afraid to speak. "Your fleet is impressive," Corvith admitted. "I will give you that. But numbers aren't everything. The Dralith are the greatest warriors in the galaxy." "Our technology is old," Monroe interrupted. "Your technology is 200 years behind what you're looking at right now. Your weapons won't scratch our shields. Your shields won't stop our weapons. This isn't a battle you can win, Admiral." Corvith's scales flushed red with anger. I dare to tell you the truth." Monroe's voice was quiet, but hard as stone. "Because I'm hoping you're smart enough to listen. You came here to threaten our world, our families, our children. That was a mistake, but it doesn't have to be a fatal one." Monroe leaned forward slightly, and his eyes seemed to look right through the screen, right into Corvith's soul. "You have 6 minutes to withdraw from our system. All 12,000 of your ships will turn around and leave. You will not stop. You will not look back. You will return to Drala space and tell your Emperor what you saw here today. And if I refuse?" Corvith asked, though his voice had lost some of its strength. "Then I will destroy your fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every engine." Monroe paused. "But I will save your people. Every escape pod will be protected. Every survivor will be treated with respect. Because unlike the Dralith, humanity doesn't kill unless we have to." The bridge was completely silent. Corvith looked at his tactical display again. The human ships had finished their formation. They now formed a perfect sphere around his armada, cutting off every possible escape route. His own fleet suddenly looked very small. "Admiral," Veth whispered, "perhaps we should consider silence." Corvith snapped, but his mind was racing. Could he fight? His 12,000 ships against 73,000? With technology he didn't understand? Against weapons he couldn't analyze? He thought about his orders. The Emperor had sent him here to crush humanity, to make an example of them, to show the galaxy that no one could refuse the Dralith. But the Emperor didn't know about this. No one knew about this. The entire galaxy had believed the humans were weak. The entire galaxy had been wrong. 5 minutes, Monroe said in the Galactic Council Hall. Every species was watching the same feed. The screens showed both fleets, the human ships dwarfing the Dralith armada. Text scrolled across the bottom of the display, showing the countdown Monroe had given. No one was laughing now. The Krethvan ambassador was clicking his jaws nervously, a sign of extreme stress in his species. The Vilnoxi delegates were crying tears of joy, watching their oppressors face a power they couldn't defeat. The Eryxians stood perfectly still, their ancient minds trying to understand what they were seeing. 300 years, the Eryxian ambassador murmured. "They fooled us for 300 years. How is that possible?" No one had an answer. Back on the Burning Claw, Corvith made his decision. "All ships," he commanded, "prepare to attack. Target the nearest human vessels. Full weapons free." His crew hesitated. They could see the numbers. They could see the impossible technology. But they were Dralith. They followed orders. "Admiral Monroe," Corvith said to the screen, "the Dralith do not surrender. We do not run. We are the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and we will prove it here today." Monroe's expression didn't change. He almost looked sad. 3 minutes, Admiral. I'm giving you 3 more minutes to change your mind. Please use them wisely." Corvith cut the communication and turned to his weapons officer. "The moment the timer hits 0, I want every gun we have firing at those human ships. Show them what Dralith power really means." The countdown continued. On Earth, billions of people watched the drama unfold. They had seen the human fleet appear. They had heard Monroe's ultimatum. Now they waited, holding their breath, to see what would happen next. President Chun stood in her command center, surrounded by her advisors. They watched the timer tick down. 2 minutes. 1 minute. 30 seconds. "He's not going to withdraw," one advisor said. "The Dralith are too proud." Chun nodded slowly. "I know. Admiral Monroe knows too. That's why he gave them a chance. So the galaxy would see that we tried to avoid this. And when they refuse?" Chun looked at the screen, at the massive human fleet that had been hidden for so long. She thought about the weapons those ships carried. She thought about what was about to happen to 12,000 Dralith vessels. "Then the galaxy will see something else," she said quietly. "They'll see what happens when you threaten humanity's children." The timer hit 0. Grand Admiral Corvith gave the order. "All ships fire." 12,000 Dralith warships opened fire at once. Plasma torpedoes, laser beams, and missiles flew toward the human fleet in a massive wave of destruction. It was enough firepower to crack a planet. It was the most powerful attack the Dralith had ever launched. The weapons flew through space toward the nearest human ship's dot, and then they were gone. Not destroyed. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Just gone. As if they had never existed. Corvith stared at his screen in disbelief. What happened? Where did our weapons go? Before anyone could answer, the human ships began to move, and the Dralith learned what fear really meant. The galaxy would later call it the 6-Minute War. Historians would study it for centuries. Scientists would spend their entire lives trying to understand what happened. And soldiers from every species would have nightmares about it until the day they died. It began the moment the Dralith weapons disappeared. Fleet. Admiral Monroe watched from his command ship. The silent thunder as the enemy attack simply ceased to exist. The weapons hadn't been stopped. They hadn't been blocked. Humanity's shields worked on a principle that other species couldn't understand. They didn't absorb energy. They erased the probability that the attack had ever happened. To the universe itself, those weapons had never been fired. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "enemy attack has been neutralized. All ships reporting ready." Monroe nodded slowly. He had hoped Corvith would see reason. He had hoped this wouldn't be necessary. But the Dralith had made their choice. "All ships," Monroe said quietly, "engage." The human fleet moved to the Dralith. It looked like magic. Human ships that were there one moment were somewhere else the next. They didn't fly through space like normal vessels. They seemed to skip through it, appearing and disappearing faster than any sensor could track. The first wave of human weapons hit the Dralith fleet before anyone could react. They weren't normal weapons. They weren't plasma or lasers or missiles. The human projectiles existed in multiple dimensions at once. They passed through shields like those shields weren't there. They struck Dralith ships with surgical precision, destroying weapons and engines while leaving hulls intact. Grand Admiral Corvith watched as ship after ship went dark around him. His fleet wasn't being destroyed. It was being taken apart, piece by piece, like a child breaking a toy. "Return fire!" He screamed. All ships returned fire. But there was nothing to fire at. The human ships were never where the Dralith weapons aimed. They seemed to know where every attack would go before it was launched. Some said later that human technology could see a few seconds into the future. Others said their computers were simply faster than anything else in the galaxy. No one knew for sure. On the bridge of the Burning Claw, explosions rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Officers shouted damage reports that grew worse by the second. Forward weapons destroyed. Engines offline. Shields have failed. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. Corvith grabbed the edge of his command chair to stay standing. Through the view screen, he could see his fleet dying. Proud Dralith warships, each one capable of conquering a planet, were now floating dead in space. Their weapons were gone. Their engines were dark. They were helpless, and the humans hadn't killed anyone. That was the part that broke Corvith's mind. He could see escape pods launching from disabled ships. He could see small human vessels moving through the battlefield, not attacking, but protecting. They were forming shields around the pods. They were guiding them to safety. The humans were destroying his fleet while actively saving his people. It made no sense. In every war Corvith had ever fought, you killed your enemies. You showed them no mercy. That was how the galaxy worked. But humanity didn't follow those rules. They had power beyond anything Corvith had ever seen, and they were using it with impossible precision. They could have killed every Dralith in seconds. Instead, they were dismantling ships like surgeons, removing the ability to fight while preserving the ability to survive. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it was over, 12,000 Dralith warships floated dead in space. Not one had escaped. Not one had surrendered. The humans had simply taken them all apart, so fast and so completely that surrender wasn't even possible. But the survival rate was 98%. Almost every Dralith soldier was still alive, floating in escape pods or trapped in disabled ships. Grand Admiral Corvith stood on his broken bridge, surrounded by darkness and the groans of dying metal. Most of his crew was unconscious or injured. The burning claw was finished. A flash of light filled the bridge. And suddenly Corvith wasn't on his ship anymore. He was standing in a white room. Clean, bright. Human doctors surrounded him, already checking his wounds, already treating injuries he hadn't realized he had. Where am I? He demanded. What is this? A human officer approached him. You're on the medical ship, Hope. You've been safely transported from your vessel. Please don't struggle. We're trying to help you. Transported? How? That's impossible. Teleportation technology doesn't exist. The officer smiled slightly. There are many things the galaxy thought were impossible. Please, Admiral, let the doctors work. You have some internal bleeding that needs attention. Corvith wanted to fight, wanted to scream, wanted to do something, but his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. He collapsed into the arms of human medical staff, who caught him gently and laid him on a soft bed. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was a human nurse checking his vital signs. She looked at him not with hate or anger, but with something that looked almost like pity. In the council hall, no one moved. The screens had shown everything. The battle that wasn't really a battle. The technology that shouldn't exist. The mercy that made no sense. The Dralith ambassador's scales had turned pale gray, a sign of deep shock in his species. He stared at the images of his empire's fleet, now nothing but floating wreckage and escape pods. That's not possible. He kept whispering. That's not possible. That's not possible. The Velnoxy delegates were openly weeping. For generations, the Dralith had been their oppressors. They had watched their worlds burn. They had seen their families killed. And now, in 6 minutes, the greatest military power in the galaxy had been reduced to nothing. The Eryxian ambassador was the first to find his voice. We have lived for 200,000 years, he said slowly. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have witnessed the birth and death of stars. We thought we understood the universe. He turned to look at the other delegates. We understood nothing. We knew nothing. We were children playing with toys while a giant slept beside us. No one disagreed. Fleet Admiral Monroe appeared on the council screens. His face was tired but calm. Behind him, his officers worked quietly at their stations. "Members of the Galactic Council," Monroe said, "the battle is over. The Dralith fleet has been neutralized. Casualties on their side are minimal. Casualties on our side are 0. He paused to let that sink in. "We have begun rescue operations for all Dralith survivors. They will be treated with respect and returned to their territory once they are healthy. We have no interest in prisoners. We have no interest in revenge." The Dralith ambassador stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Why? Why spare us? After what we threatened to do? After what we tried to do?" Monroe looked at him for a long moment. "Because killing should always be the last choice, not the first. Because power without mercy is just cruelty. Because we hope, Admiral, that you will return to your Emperor and tell him what you saw here today. Tell him that humanity is not weak. Tell him we never were." Monroe's eyes hardened. "And tell him that the next time anyone threatens our children, we will not be so gentle." The screen went dark dot in the council hall. 1,000 species stood in silence, trying to understand a universe that had suddenly become very different. Humanity wasn't the weak species anymore. Humanity wasn't the young race that needed protection. Humanity was something else entirely, and no one knew what would happen next. 3 days after the 6-Minute War, the Galactic Council called the largest meeting in its history. Every species sent representatives. Every empire sent observers. Ships filled the space around the council hall until there was no room for more. They all came to see Humanity. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked into the great hall with her head held high. The whispers started the moment she appeared. Species that had mocked her for decades now watched her with fear in their eyes. Species that had ignored her now moved out of her way. She walked to the central platform, the place where only the most important speakers stood. No one tried to stop her. No one said she didn't belong there. Behind her, giant screens showed images of humanity's fleet. 73,000 ships, still holding formation around Earth. The number glowed in the corner of the display, a constant reminder of what the galaxy had learned. But there was something else on the screen. A second number, hidden behind a question mark. The number of ships humanity had not revealed. The assets that were still hidden, still secret, still waiting. Elena had argued against including that detail. Fleet Admiral Monroe had insisted. "Let them wonder," he had said. "Let them imagine. Whatever they imagine will probably be less than the truth." Elena reached the platform and looked out at the assembled species. Thousands of faces stared back at her. Some were angry. Some were terrified. Most were simply confused, trying to understand how their entire view of the galaxy had been wrong. "Members of the Galactic Council," Elena began, "for 300 years, humanity has been part of this body. We have listened to your debates. We have followed your rules. We have watched your empires rise and fall." She paused, letting the silence grow heavy. "We watched the Dralith enslave the Veloxi. We watched the Krethvan consume 3 entire species. We watched the strong prey on the weak, over and over, while this council debated and did nothing." Angry murmurs rippled through the hall. Elena ignored them. "When humanity first came to the stars, we were naive. We thought the galaxy would be a place of cooperation, of shared knowledge, of mutual respect." Her voice hardened. "We learned quickly that we were wrong. The galaxy is a jungle. The strong eat the weak. That is the only law that matters." She looked directly at the Dralith ambassador, who couldn't meet her eyes. "So we adapted. We hid our strength. We let you laugh at us. We let you mock our ships and question our courage. And while you were laughing, we built. We invented. We prepared. Elena gestured at the screens behind her. What you see here is 73,000 warships. Each one uses technology 2 centuries ahead of anything else in this galaxy. Our weapons work on principles your scientists won't understand for generations. Our shields stop attacks before they happen. Our ships can appear anywhere, anytime, without warning. She let that sink in, and this is only what we chose to reveal. The question mark on the screen seemed to grow larger. Around the hall, delegates shifted nervously. What else did humanity have? What were they still hiding? We could have conquered the galaxy, Elena said quietly. We had the power. We had the technology. It would have been easy. The Dralith couldn't stop us. The Eryxians couldn't stop us. All of you together couldn't stop us. She shook her head slowly. But that's not what we want. Humanity didn't build this fleet to become emperors. We built it because we were afraid. Afraid of being enslaved like the Velnoxy. Afraid of being hunted like so many other species. Afraid that one day someone would come for our children. Her voice softened. 3 days ago, the Dralith came for our children. They pointed their weapons at our home. They threatened to burn our cities. And we showed them what happens when you threaten the things we love. She looked around the hall, meeting as many eyes as she could. But we didn't slaughter them. We didn't commit genocide. We destroyed their fleet and saved their people, because we believe that power should be used to protect, not to destroy. The Eryxian ambassador rose on his ancient legs. His voice was like dry leaves in the wind. Ambassador Vasquez, humanity has demonstrated power beyond anything we have seen in 200,000 years of existence. You say you don't want to conquer. You say you want peace. But how can we trust you? How can we know you won't change your minds? Elena looked at the old alien for a long moment. You can't, she admitted. You can't trust us any more than we could trust you. For 300 years, we watched this council. We saw how you treated the weak. We heard your jokes about humanity. We learned exactly what kind of galaxy we lived in. She spread her hands. So here is what we offer. Not trust. Something simpler. A promise. The hall went completely silent. Humanity will not seek conquest. We will not take your worlds or enslave your people. We will not use our power to bully or threaten. Her eyes hardened. But we will also not be ignored anymore. When we speak in this council, you will listen. When we ask for peace, you will consider it. And when the innocent cry out for protection, when the weak are preyed upon by the strong, we will answer. She pointed at the Dralith ambassador. The Dralith claimed to be the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They used that power to enslave, to conquer, to destroy. We have proven that they are not the greatest. We are. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire hall. And we choose to use that power differently. Whether you believe us is your choice. Whether you test us is your choice. But if you threaten our home again, if any of you threaten our children again, you will learn what we learned 3 days ago. What's that? Someone called from the crowd. Elena smiled, and there was no warmth in it. That humanity was never weak. We were patient. There's a difference. She turned and walked off the platform. Behind her, the council chamber remained silent for 6 hours. No one could think of anything to say. No one wanted to be the first to speak. The galaxy had changed, and no one knew what the rules were anymore. Weeks later, Alana sat in her office on Earth, looking out at the stars. The crisis had passed. The Dralith had retreated to their territory, their emperor suddenly very interested in peace negotiations. Other species were sending diplomats to Earth, hoping to build friendships they should have built centuries ago. Her tablet buzzed with an urgent message. She picked it up, expecting more diplomatic papers. What she read made her blood run cold. It was a report from deep space sensors at the edge of the galaxy. They had detected something. Objects moving toward the Milky Way from the void between galaxies. Objects that weren't on any map. Objects that were larger than anything humanity had ever built. Objects that made even Earth's hidden fleets look small. Elena read the report twice, then opened a secure channel to Fleet Admiral Monroe. "Jackson," she said quietly, "have you seen this?" "I'm reading it now." Monroe's voice was tense. "Whatever these things are, they'll reach the outer systems in about 18 months. Our best estimate is over 1 million individual objects. Size ranges from small moons to, well, we're not sure. Our sensors can't measure the big ones." Elena closed her eyes. Humanity had just revealed its secret strength to the galaxy. They had proven they could defeat any enemy. They had thought they were finally safe. "What do we do?" she asked. Monroe was quiet for a long moment. "Elena, you remember when we showed the council that question mark? The hidden assets we didn't reveal?" "Yes, I think we're going to need them. All of them." Elena looked at the report again. 1 million objects. Coming from outside the galaxy. Coming for reasons no one understood. "Jackson, the ships we showed were our main fleet. 73,000 vessels. What exactly do we have hidden?" Another long pause. "You don't want to know." "I'm asking anyway." Monroe sighed. "Let's just say that what we showed the council was what we built to defend against threats inside the galaxy. What we kept hidden is what we built in case something worse came along." Elena stared at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, something was coming. Something big enough to make humanity's greatest fleet look like toys. "Are we ready?" she asked. Monroe's voice was steady. "We've been getting ready for 300 years. For this exact possibility. For something we couldn't even imagine. Will it be enough?" The question hung in the air. "I don't know," Monroe admitted. "But I know one thing. Whatever's coming, they picked the wrong galaxy to invade. They just don't know it yet." Elena closed the channel and looked out at the stars one more time. 300 years of hiding. 300 years of building. 300 years of preparing for threats they could see, and threats they could only imagine. And now the real test was coming. She smiled grimly and started composing a message to the Galactic Council. It was time for another meeting. Time for another surprise. Because humanity had more secrets to share, and the galaxy was going to need all of them.